Hi, it's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie, and it is Bodyful day 59. We're working on hearing the sound of two fingers rubbing. Now, as you might suspect, two fingers rubbing or three fingers rubbing does not require additional props. So let's go ahead and jump in. Take your deep breath in and release. Deep breath in, breathing from all the way down into here. Activate that solar plexus. Deep breath in. And release. Think about any gunk you had today. Anything that threw you off, anything caught you off guard, anything that was unexpected. And think about how it may have affected your nervous system. Go ahead and take a deep breath in. And release. All right. Today we're talking about the sense of hearing. And if you recall, on Monday we talked about the sense of touch. We had two things as well. Monday was the 2-point test, and how you could take a compass and figure out the smallest distance that you could sense something, sense two dots being pushed up against your skin at the same time. And the idea, of course, being where you do more defined work, so your fingertips, you are going to have more ability to detect 2 points that land at the same time than on the back of your arm, where you don't spend as much time doing definitive work. Today, not detailed work, today we are working on the minimal amount of sensation you need to hear two fingers rubbing, or in this case 3 or 4. There's two. There's two. Two fingers rubbing. I don't know if you can hear that. If I go like this, you can. But two fingers rubbing. The extent to which you can hear two fingers rubbing is, of course, a hearing test. We did hearing last Friday when we looked at the Rhines test for conduction. Today we're looking for can you hear sounds coming at you? How far away does that sound have to be until you can detect it? Now remember, when two fingers are rubbing, they are shoving against the molecules of air, causing sound waves. Even though it's pretty minimal, two fingers rubbing is creating a ripple in the sound wave, which then eventually goes down into your auditory canal, hits your eardrum, causes vibration, which is sent through your 3 small bones of your ear and into your cochlea, which in there's a membrane that replicates the sound wave that it has on the outside. So it's really weird, but if you were to stretch out a cochlea, because a cochlea is a strange snail-shaped object, if you stretched it out and unraveled it, the end closest to the eardrum, or closest to the stapes, I think is the last bone that pushes up against the cochlea. The part of that there, it has the largest part and the thickest part of the membrane, and then as it goes out, it starts thick and it goes narrow as it gets to the tip, just like you would expect a snail. It starts wider and gets narrower as it gets to the tip. Inside the eardrum, or inside the cochlea, that membrane also starts maybe wide and gets narrow. It also starts thicker and gets narrower, so that there's less that has to move by the time it gets to the very end. And what that does is every time sound hits the eardrum and then goes through the bones and then hits the cochlea, that vibration is replicated on the is replicated on the now I'm blanking again. Of course, on the membrane on the inside of the cochlea. Now, that causes little hair cells that are on those membranes to brush up and back, or cells that have little hairs on top of them, to brush up against a tectoral plate. And that plate rubs against those, and it's that rubbing that eventually ends up with the perception of sound. So sound has a lot of steps it needs to take. It needs to first get to your ear, then it needs to get through your eardrum. So the Rhines test tells us whether or not it's open in there. And then if it gets to the eardrum, Rhines-Weber's also tells us whether or not the 3 bones in the ear are actually moving, or if they're sclerotic, which means that they fuse together so that they're not vibrating anymore. And then it has to send that vibration into the membrane in your cochlea, which then has to wiggle underneath a plate, which then has little hairs that go, oh, hey, we've just been moved. We sense a sound at this frequency, at this frequency, at this frequency, and at this frequency, and boom, you have a single note. So there is a lot of stuff that has to go on to make the sense of sound. So you can imagine that a very simple test, like the 2-finger sound test, is really very vague, but it gets us a good indication of what you're hearing. So in order to do this, start with your fingers, or have somebody that you're living with start with their fingers far away, arm's width or further, and rub them together. See how far away they can get, just like the peanut butter test. See how far away you can get before you can hear that sound. And now what does that tell you? If you can hear that sound, the further away, we're mostly looking at comparison between ears. So if the right ear can hear further away than the left ear, we know something's going on in the left ear. If you can't hear either, we know, what do we know? We know that there could be a blockage in the auditory canal. We know that there could be a fusing of the bones inside the ear. We know that there could be hair cells that are damaged at just this frequency. That's the frequency that they're at. So we don't know specifically that you can't hear, but we know that generally you have the inability to hear the frequency of fingers rubbing. Now, just as an aside, there are people that have spots in their auditory, in their ability to hear a range of notes that just have a little snippet, and it's typically called a cookie cutter hearing loss. And literally, it's as if somebody came on that plate, on that membrane, and just kind of stamped out one level and said, no, you can't hear at that level. And they can hear above it pretty well, they can hear below it really well, but that one level, they cannot hear very well. Likewise, apparently, men have a hard time hearing women's voices in that range because their ears don't resonate that frequency as well. So that's another story for another day, but the length of your auditory canal is designed to amplify sounds that are within your normal hearing range. It just so happens that the length and width of a man's auditory canal is not really tuned to women's voices. My husband always brings this up because he says he hears wah, 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 wah when I'm talking. But despite that, you can use the 2-finger test to figure out how good you can hear in either ear. So, just a way to play around with senses and get you back into your body. You can use the 2-finger rubbing test. All right, take a deep breath in. And release. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. I've got a really cool talk for tomorrow. It's about the sense of smell. See you then.